Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over, welcome to another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a seasoned comic book professional, about what he does for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you have subscribed, thank you very much. You've really helped to build this show into something bigger, reaching a larger audience. Thank you so very much. Milos Militek. In one of your recent Ask Chuck Dixon vids, you fondly mentioned romance as a storytelling device in superhero comics, but shouldn't that be one of the most distracting tools in a genre like superheroes? Not only these scenes may come as boring for a reader who expects fast-paced action, but also it risks the story turning into unnecessary melodrama, as these types of relationships often carry an impending danger for its protagonists. We all know what happened to Gwen Stacy. Well, romance, or love interest or basic human relationships are what make these characters relatable. And yeah, when I was a kid reading comics, I wanted to see, Spider-Man, punching out bad guys. But, just a lone hero going around fighting crime and doing good and all the rest of it, it's not enough for a story. It's certainly not enough for a full life for these fictional creations. They have to have human relationships. There have to be stakes involved, particularly in a superhero story. Why do superheroes have secret identities? To protect their loved ones. If they don't have any loved ones, what's the point? Uh, so, and as much as you or I would be loath to admit it, yeah, we wanted to see the Rock'em Sock'em action each issue, but what brought us back was their continuing life story. And part of that life story was their romantic entanglements, their love life, the people they cared about and the people that cared about them. And you mentioned Gwen Stacy. Well, the reason why we all remember Gwen Stacy is because Stan and Johnny Romita made us fall in love with Gwen, and then they killed her. And as cruel as that may sound, that was a high dramatic point for comics. And certainly a high dramatic point for the Spider-Man series. And we all recall that storyline because of its tragic ending. If Romeo and Juliet had, skipped off into the sunshine at the end of that play, no one would probably remember it now. So, you have to have the good with the bad, the rough with the smooth, and you can't, we don't want to read about tortured loner characters all the time. And the problem is, if the romance scenes are boring, that's not because romance scenes are in and of themselves boring. It's because they weren't well written or weren't believably written. They didn't touch you in any way. They didn't seem real. And I have to agree, in a lot of comics and in a lot of movies and TV, particularly recently, the romantic angle is poorly written. It's not engaging. They don't make any effort to make us like the characters enough to care whether or not they fall in love. And also, largely, nobody seems to know how to write a romance that's earned. It seems to be just a convenience or a contrivance that, the gal falls for the guy or the guy falls for the gal, and we're not shown why. We're largely because we're not drawn in to be engaged with these characters enough to love them ourselves. As I've said often in these things, to write a good romance story, you first have to have your reader or your viewer or your audience fall in love with the characters first, even before they fall in love with each other, so that when they do get together, there's an emotional plus there. There's some oodles for the consumer. And as far as romance goes in comics, romance have been a part of comics for a long time. Archie is a company built entirely upon a romantic triangle. that's been going on for decades and decades. And also, once upon a time, straight up romance comics were the sales leaders in comics. I mean, by far. Young romance comics, at one point, at its peak, was selling 3 million copies a month. I don't think DC and Marvel put together sell 3 million copies of all of their comic books a year. And yet this, young romance and dozens and dozens and dozens of other romance comics were gobbled up, just torn off the newsstand, largely by female readers. And female readers, for the longest time, for decade after decade, were the largest audience, the biggest demographic for comics. And they bought all kinds of comics. They didn't just buy romance comics. And largely American comics have gotten away from that. An awful lot of manga readers are female, but because of American comics' insistence on superheroes all day and all night, 24/7, they kind of left the girls behind. Titles like X-Men, I will submit, were largely popular because they had a female readership. I know my female readership on books like Birds of Prey and Nightwing were large and contributed to the success of both of those titles. Is there a way to get female readership back? Yeah, better stories, more realistic human relationships, things like that. Things that girls like to read, and guys won't admit they like to read. More engaging plot lines, more engaging characters. Female audiences are a little bit more demanding of their entertainment than guys generally are. So there you have it. John Bua, do you believe in space aliens? Not germs on other planets, but actual civilizations with spacefaring technology. If so, do you think they ever visited Earth? I haven't seen any compelling evidence that there are intelligent life forms visiting the planet. Yeah, I know all about the UFO footage and all the rest of it. But in this day of high definition photography and all of the various detection devices we have, and cameras in space, cameras everywhere, why we don't have an actual clear, compelling, convincing images of these UFOs, I don't know. But do I believe in life on other planets? Yeah. I mean, I believe there's life within our solar system. There's very compelling arguments that Europa and one of the other moons, is it Erebus? One of the other moons circling one of the larger planets in our system have, open oceans with water in them, and water warm enough, obviously warm enough because it's liquid, to spawn life. And there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't spawn life. Everything is there. The same chemistry that appeared here on Earth. So I think definitely there is life. Maybe single-celled organisms or whatever. Now, are there advanced civilizations out in space capable of space travel and things like that? I don't doubt that there are. I mean, the billions and billions of planets and stars out there, the odds are there are other civilizations as advanced or far more advanced than ours. The only problem is I don't think any of them have cracked the problem of faster than light travel, if faster than light travel is even possible. And if it is possible, it would be a long time before we ever saw any ETs in our neighborhood, because we are in such a remote part of the Milky Way. We are just so far away from every other star. We are the hillbillies of our galaxy. We're the rural rubes living out in the sticks. So yeah, do I think all of that's possible? Yeah. Do I think they visited us? I would need more proof. I'm open to the idea, but I would need more proof. Eber Perry As you're a self-confessed geek, do you get geeky about storing your comics? Are they casually stacked on a shelf or bagged, boarded, and in a mylar top holder? Do you consider books that you've written, comp copies, to be part of your collection? How do you feel about slabbed book? Each to their own, but I can't imagine paying for a book that I can't read. Um, yeah, I'm with you. I bag and board my older comics. Um, you know, simply to preserve them so I can read them some more. But generally, I want to be able to read them. I don't understand um, the slab thing. It's like, I have the bragging rights. I've got a, 8.5 of this issue of Fantastic Four number 10. Yeah, that's great. I don't care. I've never really been into the collector end of it, other than buying them to read. And if they'll reprint them in collections. Hold on, didn't mean to show that. Yeah, I'm just as happy to have them in collections. So, in a lot of cases, I sold off all my older comics as soon as they printed them in reprints, and generally either broke even or even made a little money, selling the comics themselves. So yeah, I'm just about wanting to read them. And as I get older, I want to read them in larger and larger editions. That's as my eyes begin to fail me with age. I love those big Taschen collections of the early Marvels. They're just huge, and fun to hold and easy to read. So um, yeah, I mean the primarily the older comics that I have now are ones I bought in the last 20 years for the most part, and they're largely war and Western comics. My 50s war comics from Atlas and DC and EC and a bunch of other companies, ranging all the way from the early 50s into the early 70s, are basically my most prized comics. And I have a whole bunch of 50s Westerns from Atlas and DC and Prize Comics and other publishers like that. Now, as for what I store them in, let's get real geeky. Uh, like, boy, 20 years ago, Sterlite used to make this container. It's called a show off. It was absolutely perfect for storing comics upright. And I bought lots of these at Walmart. And whenever they were on sale, I just bought, shopping carts loaded with these things, and eventually transferred all of my comics out of the cardboard boxes and into these because they're airtight. They preserve the comics better. And I know fans go on and wax poetic about the smell of old comics, but I got bad sinuses and I really don't like the smell of old comics. And you know who else doesn't like the smell of old comics? My wife. She doesn't want to have to go into my closet and smell, rotting pulp paper. So it was basically at her suggestion that I bought these stackable show offs, which are basically hold as many comics as a short box without the muss, fuss, and odor. And, they're acid free and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore. Yes, I'm sad about it too. I wish they did. I wish some company would make these. And I haven't really seen anybody make a plastic. I've seen plastic comic boxes, boxes made specifically for comics, but they're not airtight. They're just plastic. So yeah, I like these. They stack nice, and you can put labels on them and all that jazz. So there you go. Yes, I am geeky about storing my comics, but not so geeky that I don't want to read them. So, Joshua Ignatowski, what do you think of Batman: The Brave and the Bold, the cartoon from 2008 to 2011? I love this series. This was such an awesome comic series. I know it's Bruce Timm. Did Paul Dini work on this as well? I don't remember. It certainly has all the marks of both of them working on this series. And I really envy them because they were given free reign to the entire DC universe in the spirit of the Brave and Bold comic. And I like the way the series was set up, where they would have like a pre-credit sequence, which didn't relate to the rest of the series. It was just like a little Easter egg, a little present for the fans. And and also they presented characters from all over the history of DC, from Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, uh, and kept them all in character. Now they twisted and warped them and did all kinds of things to them, but at their core, these guys dig these characters and they dig the DC continuity, and they kept it all honest and kept it all recognizable to longtime fans. And they explored a lot of concepts from Elseworlds to, you know, throwbacks to, oh God, this is just a terrific series. And it was funny, it was fun, it was suspenseful. I loved how they recharacterized Aquaman, because I famously don't really like Aquaman as a character. And by turning him into like a preening jerk, I mean, I just dug that the most. I really liked that aspect of it. But it's, you know, it's one of my favorite animated series of this type. I think it equally stands with Batman the Animated Series, which for me is the gold standard for these superhero drama comics. And everything was inventive about it, and everything was fun. And you know, the Easter eggs and surprises and fan service in a series that, you know, kids obviously dug, because I think it did well for the channel. So yes, yes, thumbs up for Batman Brave and Bold. Tiki Dino says, I can forgive your opinion on Johnny Quest. I like to ask, how would you write a Quest book? Yeah, I got it. I'm not going to apologize. A few weeks ago, I tromped with muddy boots all over the Johnny Quest franchise, and I won't go into why. And a number of you sent me defenses for Johnny. One guy said he was going to make a vain attempt to defend the series because he knew I wasn't going to change my mind. And I also heard from a bunch of friends who already knew my opinion about Johnny Quest, but you know, decided to express their dismay anyway. Sorry, the series didn't do a whole lot for me. Now, would I take a crack at it? Yeah, I probably would, because as so many people have told me, you know, they don't understand why I didn't like Johnny Quest because it seems so in my wheelhouse. And for the most part, it is in my wheelhouse. I just didn't like the way it was presented in its original form. And as a number of you have said, you must have been a really tough-minded kid. And I guess I was, at least when it came to geeky stuff. I mean, I had a years-long moratorium on Marvel Comics when Steve Ditko left Spider-Man. I wouldn't even look at a Marvel comic. So yeah, I had my opinions on things I liked and I didn't like, and they were very definite. But yeah, would I take a crack at it? Of course I would, because years ago in an interview, I tromped all over Scooby-Doo, which, if anything, is a series I really openly loathed as compared to just being indifferent toward Johnny Quest. I really did not like Scooby-Doo. I thought it was really like the nadir of Hanna-Barbera's creations, because it just was like a big middle finger to the kids. Like, we're not even going to bother to write decent stories. And so I said in an interview that, you know, of all the characters in existence, the one I would never write a story for is Scooby-Doo. And then Joan Hilty, editor of the Scooby-Doo comic at DC, she assigned me, basically, she ordered me. You know, obviously she wasn't being serious, but she assigned me to write an issue of Scooby-Doo. And so I had to take a good look at Scooby-Doo and figure out what it was I didn't like and what it was there that could work if you put some effort to it, unlike Hanna-Barbera did. And I wrote one and I enjoyed it. So I wrote a bunch more. So I wrote quite a few Scooby-Doo stories before leaving for CrossGen. And I had fun on it. I liked the characters. I learned to like the characters. But, you know, I wrote actual real mysteries that needed resolutions. And I also got away with having an actual ghost in a story as opposed to, you know, someone pretending to be a ghost. Joshua Ignatowski again. If I recall correctly, you said that in an issue of Birds of Prey, you established that Power Girl's flight speed to actually get to overseas locations is the same as just taking passenger airplane flights to them. And that because of this, she prefers to take plane rides to overseas missions instead of flying there under her own power and getting bored from having nothing to do other than look at the ocean for several hours on end. You personally imagine Superman as being able to fly faster than her while in atmosphere, or that their in atmosphere speeds are basically the same? Also, is the speed of a passenger jet Power Girl's absolute highest flight speed in atmosphere? Or is it more of a cruising speed that she flies at to conserve her own energy and or avoid accidentally causing the formation of hurricanes and such from creating too much wind? Um, for some reason, this reminds me of something. This this question or series of questions. Um, yeah, I always thought, hey, if you could run around the world real fast or fly long distances real fast, it would still get boring. I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that the shorter amount of time travel takes, the more impatient we get with it. And if you've ever traveled by plane and then alternately traveled by train, you'll know what I mean. You travel by plane, you're like, oh, God, are we ever going to land? Are we ever going to get there? And it's only a few hours in the air. When you go by train, it's like, oh man, I don't care if we get there or not. Especially if you have your own compartment in the dining car. It's like, this train could take 2 days to get there. I really don't care. I'm reading my book. I'm in an air conditioned compartment. I got my music. I'm cool, baby. I got attendants waiting on me. This is awesome. But then on the plane, you're just, you got your fists on the armrest, like, oh. And especially when you land. Why do we do that? We land, we're only a few minutes away from getting our luggage and getting the hell out of there. But it's like those are the longest minutes of your life. But between the time the plane lands and they open that damn door and let you out. Whereas on a train, you come to your stop, hey, and they help you out. And you're, oh, yeah, I'm cool, baby. Stand on the platform and watch the train depart. So I always figured as a superhero or if you're the Flash or somebody like that, it's like, yeah, this is really cool. I can go this fast, but it still seems to be taking a long time. And now Power Girl's origin is so tortured that even I can't figure it out, but she's some kind of Kryptonian in some way. So I guess she's as fast as Superman. And if you want to get technical, Superman could get anywhere on the planet by just doing a loop. He just go up in outer space, and as the planet's turning beneath him, just come right straight back down. He could probably be anywhere in the world in a few minutes. But for the Birds of Prey story, the Oracle required Power Girl to fly across the Atlantic to Eastern Europe, and it was obviously by jet an 8-hour flight. Now, it might have only been a 2-hour flight for Power Girl, but still, it's 2 hours she didn't want to spend. She'd rather be sitting in a plane, sipping a vodka and tonic in first class for 8 hours than flying all by herself over nothing for 2. Take your choice. So that just made sense to me. I'm certain that, both Superman and Power Girl can fly faster than a commercial jet. And commercial jets don't even go as fast as commercial jets can go because they're conserving fuel. But I hope that answers all of your questions. and as far as creating like tsunami effects or hurricanes by flying too fast, I've never really considered that. I imagine someone as powerful as Superman would have to be conscious of that he wasn't creating atmospheric disturbances. But, is he creating any more of a disturbance than a fighter jet or the Concorde did at one time? Anyway. Interesting question. Very interesting question. Thank you for letting me get really down and nerdy with it. 1983 J Cheat or JC Heat. I don't know. Do you have any advice for someone pursuing a career in comics? Man, you got a road to hoe. My biggest advice is make sure you love it first. Because it's a highly competitive field only because there's so few people really that do it full time. There's not that many full-time comic book writers when you think about it. And so you really got to love it to get into it, and you got to be committed. And but as far as practical advice, I don't even know. Apparently, you can't even submit pitches to the major publishers anymore. You pretty much have to know them. Once upon a time, you could go to conventions and meet editors. I haven't seen an editor at a convention in years. So I don't know how you go about approaching them. I always joke that if you want to get into comics, write a hit TV series or a blockbuster movie, and then you'll be welcomed with open arms. But just to get in as a comic book person, the irony these days is, and it's always changing, as everything is always changing, is it's never been easier and it's never been harder because of the internet. You can create a web comic and get it up there and do print on demand and everything else, and you don't have the upfront costs of publication that once stymied people trying to do independent projects. But there's no reason you can't do an independent project, especially if you write and draw. You're doing the whole thing yourself, so you don't have to pay out any money. If you're just a writer, it's tougher. You're going to have to get an artist who's willing to work with you on spec, or you're going to have to pay them. And getting an artist to work on spec is a problem because they usually have other jobs and they've got to fit your job around them. So to get to any kind of page length takes a really, really long time, and you risk them losing interest or just abandoning the project altogether. So it's a difficult prospect. But if you're a writer artist, you have to start creating comics now. I mean, and there's certainly venues open. I mean, you can post your comic on Facebook. You can post your comic on Twitter. You can do all variety of things. Arctoons is always looking for independent creators, and you don't have to have any resume or background or backlist. We're taking a look at everything. If you go to Arctoons and take a look around, you can see places where you can submit work. So yeah, it's just about getting out there and getting noticed. I use the example of Axe Cop. And the example of Axe Cop is 20 years old now, but it's a perfect example. It's this crazy high concept idea that got some traction and built a readership on the web. It's the earliest example I can think of. And the key there was high concept. If you're just going to do Captain Potato Salad, just another superhero comic, you're going to have a hard time getting noticed. But if you have a different kind of idea, it might leap out at a readership. If you've got something they haven't seen before, something immediately appealing, and comics are an immediate experience, should always be immediately appealing. Take a crack at it. And of course, there's crowdfunding. But if you're an unknown, crowdfunding is tough because you've got to make your name first, and you got to build an email list. And you've got to. I mean, look at what your boy Zach and Eric July did. I mean, before they ever thought about getting into comics, they had built a following on YouTube and other venues so that they had a ready audience to promote their comic to. And that made it a lot easier at the beginning to get the funds they needed to hire the art teams and pay for printing and fulfillment and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's tough, but it's always been tough to get into comics. It's just different. It's tough in a different way now. But as far as getting hired by the majors, first of all, they're barely paying anything anymore anyway. You're better off going on your own. But that could be a good thing. Michael Gambatti, 9764. And since you wrote Punisher, did you ever write anything with Jigsaw? I only used Jigsaw one time in the Punisher Batman thing that Johnny Romita Jr. and I did. I figured each one of them needed a villain, one of their recurring villains. And of course, for Batman, I used the Joker. And Punisher really only had the one recurring villain at the time, and that was Jigsaw. So I used Jigsaw as well. And but I never used Jigsaw in any of my regular Punisher books because generally in my Punisher stories, everybody but Frank was dead at the end of the story, and you can't just keep killing Jigsaw over and over and over again. So I kind of left him for other writers to use. I didn't use him all that much because Frank just doesn't leave a lot of people standing at the end of the story. And I created lots and lots of Punisher villains, but they were generally dead at the end of the issue or at the end of the arc. So another Punisher question. Logan Wood. I still remain adamant that you'll never nail the character of Frank Castle Punisher without the element of his time in Vietnam. I consider this part of his history to be as essential, if not more, than the inclusion of the skull on his chest that seems to pacify most fans, even if the film's tone or writing doesn't ring true. I'm very curious to know if you feel the same about this, even though its time dates the character to a specific era. That's a problem for Frank. I mean, after a while, he was going to be too long in the tooth to have been a Vietnam vet. And what do? You do some science fiction element where he's, like Nick Fury has an immortality serum that keeps him young forever. It kind of flies in the face of what the Punisher is all about. And yeah, as much as I love the fact that Frank was a Vietnam vet, it just doesn't make sense as the years go on. And because America, for the last 20 or more years, has been involved in what is essentially an endless war, you can easily shift Frank forward and say, he was in the war, whatever. You remember in Airplane, the character was, he was suffering PTSD from being in the war, and they never really specify what war it was. It was the war. And so you can give Frank a military background, a combat vet background, without even specifying, was it Iraq, was it Afghanistan, was it whatever war we're going to get engaged in next week. In these days, with the world the way it is, we have troops, combat troops, deployed all over the globe in hunter-killer teams and stuff like that. Perfect background material for Frank Castle, ad infinitum, way into the future. So yeah, as much as I don't like it, but I mean, when I was growing up, Reed Richards and Ben Grimm and other characters like that, they were World War II vets because, guys around that age, most of them were World War II vets. But as the years went on, they kind of left that behind because it would have made the characters too old. So that is one of the challenges of writing legacy characters, is explaining away the age thing. And explaining away past continuity tied to historical events. My advice to anybody writing superheroes is don't tie your superheroes to any historical events if you plan on having them be around a while. Unless you're writing the Invaders or something like that. Superheroes specifically set in a time period. If you want to reach me in any time period, brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's good in the past, it's good in the future, it's good right now. It's the most reliable way to reach me with your questions, suggestions, and further defenses of Johnny Quest. Okay. Hey, Alpha Core is out, and you can buy it. It's out. It's done. It's finished. It's from the Rippaverse. It's my superhero police procedural. It's over 100 pages long. It has jaw-dropping artwork by Joe Bennett. If you like your superheroes neat, if you like pure escapist entertainment with no message, no agenda, no nothing, just rock 'em, sock 'em, action, mystery, humor, this is the book for you. I had a blast working on it. I'm working on other projects. I've already finished 2 other projects for Eric's company. I am digging the Rippaverse. It's a lot of fun, and I think you'll have a lot of fun too. So I'll try to provide the link, and you can head on over there and pick up Alpha Core #1. So I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Thanks for subscribing, liking, all the rest of it. And please help spread the word, and I will see all of you down that road.